Tonight, President Trump sends shockwaves through Washington and the world.
I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so magnificent.
His bold plans for the Gaza Strip. How realistic are they? Or is it all a negotiation tactic by the commander and businessmen? Our panel discusses. Plus, slashing the federal government. USAID on the chopping block this week. Who else is in the crosshairs of the administration and efficiency czar Elon Musk? And faith on full display in Washington.
We have to bring religion back.
President Trump commits to bolstering faith and religious freedom at home and abroad. Coming up on Faith Nation Friday. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder. We are starting something new on Fridays here on Faith Nation. With so much news happening so fast, we want to slow it down at the end of the week and take us some time to look back at the week that was and ahead at what's coming up next. We will bring together a panel of CBN News reporters and analysts to do just that. This week, we have CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody, Senior White House Correspondent Kelly Wright, and Senior International Correspondent George Thomas. Gentlemen, happy Friday. Great to have you with us. Let's start tonight with Gaza. This week, President Trump said the U.S. would take over the war-torn Gaza Strip. Later, some White House officials seemed to walk that back a bit. We have some sound. Let's go ahead and listen, and then we'll get your thoughts.
You have to learn from history. History is, you just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation.
He sees a different future for that piece of land that has been the focus of so much terrorism, so many attacks against us, so many trials and so many tribulations. He has a different idea, and I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it.
So, Kelly, you were there in the room, and you said there was an audible gasp that you could hear. I think Bibi Netanyahu also seemed surprised and amused. Kelly, how realistic is this idea?
Well, I think in context, when you offer this kind of idea, as Bibi Netanyahu and other world leaders who actually support President Trump in trying to do something for the Palestinian people in Gaza, it's an out-of-the-box kind of idea. Natan Sharansky, a person I've interviewed before, has talked about it's so out of the box that it just might be the right thing to do because other ideas that have come forward, like the Oslo Accords, they failed miserably. This is something, if given an opportunity, a chance, could actually make a difference for not only Gaza and the Palestinian people, but for the entire Middle East. And of course, the president will have to negotiate with the leaders of Egypt and Jordan to make it truly relevant and real, and to show Arab leaders why this might be the right approach.
David, do you want to weigh in on that? And also, President Trump, he alluded to some more news coming soon that has to do with the West Bank. Any insight on what that might be?
Well, it could just be more annexed land that the United States would be in favor of for Israel to have that annexed land in the West Bank. But in terms of Gaza, look, I mean, first of all, I love the style that Trump does there, right? He's kind of reading down and he's looking down and says, welcome to the, nice to see you, good to see you. By the way, we're going to take over the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's just so nonchalant. Which kind of cracked me up, but it's actually very serious. And by the way, he's being serious here, but the asterisk is negotiation, right? This is a first salvo. This is what he does all the time. His prism is always art of the deal, whether it be on tariffs, whether it be on Greenland, whether it be on Panama, whether it be on Gaza. This is the opening salvo. And he knows, just like with tariffs, when it came to Canada and Mexico, knowing that they could not survive from a GDP standpoint, he knows darn well that Egypt's got $1.5 billion coming to them from the United States. Jordan's got $1.7 billion. And you put all of that together and you realize, well, you know what? I'll tell you what, he realizes that Egypt and Jordan need to step up and figure out and do something over there. So I think this is the opening salvo. One last point, and I'm curious if George will speak to this, but this could be kind of an interesting situation with Saudi Arabia, right? I mean, we've been hearing all along that, well, Saudi Arabia and Israel, the normalization between those countries is off the table. Well, wait a minute here. If Trump goes big on something like this in terms of taking over Gaza, and Saudi Arabia is not into that at all, maybe at some point there'll be a normalization of relationships between Saudi Arabia and Israel, because that will be a whole lot less than what Trump wants to do. And I understand Saudi Arabia says no, they have to have a Palestinian state over there. But Trump knows the deal, and that's important to understand.
Well, some people have been saying that this is kind of proof that that a two-state solution is not feasible, and he's kind of the first president to be able to say that. George, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an issue that the Middle East has been grappling with since 1947. Nothing has worked. The whole idea of a two-state solution, Israel has pushed it. The Palestinians absolutely have not. They've reneged. They've said no to this deal. Why? Because they don't want a two-state solution. They want all of Israel. They want the entire nation and all the Jews to be driven into the Mediterranean Sea. Look, I think the linchpin in this opening salvo of negotiations is going to be Saudi Arabia. In essence, what Trump did this week was to say to the Egyptians, the Jordanians, and the Saudis, look, we need to come up with a plan for what Gaza will look like post-Hamas. I'm saying post-Hamas because Hamas is still in control of Gaza. And so we're in this sort of early days, weeks of the negotiation, because Israel still needs to deal with Hamas. The region still needs to deal with Hamas. And as long as Hamas continues to be part of this equation, the whole idea of turning the Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East ain't going to be happening, because once you have the terror group still in place, all this negotiation and talk about rebuilding is just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine who would want to go stay at one of those hotels, too. Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
Let me just bring this in, because to George's point, Hamas is the linchpin in all of this. And what the president is telegraphing to Hamas is that we want to get you out of control of what's happening for the Palestinian people, because the devastation and deterioration of Gaza is a direct result of Hamas being in the forefront since 2006. And what it has done is actually disrupted the entire community of Palestinians in its quest to go after Israel from the river to the sea. That has to be stopped. Bibi Netanyahu has attested to that. Saudi Arabia knows that. Even Iran knows that. And so the president is putting forward a strategy that just might depose Hamas.
President Trump, he signed a memorandum this week. I want to get to Iran here, reinstating his maximum pressure sanctions against Iran, targeting the country's oil exports and making it clear Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. George, there was a report this week that the U.S. believes Iran is developing plans for a cruder, easier to produce bomb. Where do you think this is leading?
Look, I mean, if you just look at the last 12 months that the mullahs of Tehran have experienced, boy, oh boy, they lost a president who died in a mysterious helicopter plane crash. They lost their biggest supporters in the region, namely Hezbollah, with Hassan Nasrallah, the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah and all of his top lieutenants. Hamas has been severely crippled. And then Bashar al-Assad in neighboring Syria all of a sudden is out of the picture. Then you've got an economy that is on the downslope. And now you have the Trump administration putting maximum pressure on the regime. Trump says in his latest executive order dealing with Iran, says that he wants to drive Iran's export of oil to zero. And one of the big things here that the Biden administration did not do for 4 years was to go specifically after Iran's export of oil to other countries, namely Iran. And so what this latest round of executive orders does is to go specifically after Iran's oil export and specifically targeting China.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. And coming up, the Trump administration, including Elon Musk, takes on the massive federal bureaucracy. And newly sworn in Attorney General Pam Bondi gets to work. Our Faith Nation political panel continues next. Welcome back. We are discussing some of the big news of the week with our panel, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody, Senior White House Correspondent Kelly Wright, and Senior International Correspondent George Thomas. So let's move now to some topics here at home. This week, the Trump administration came down hard on federal bureaucracy. A lot of it goes back to Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Buyouts have been offered to some federal workers, others placed on leave, though all of that's been placed on hold because of a judge's ruling. In terms of agencies, USAID was the big target this week. There's also talk about sweeping cuts at the Department of Justice, Department of Education, and the CIA. David, what do you make of all of this, and what message do you think this administration is trying to send?
Well, the message is very clear. We're not playing around, and time is money, and in this case, literally money. I mean, look, this administration had 4 years in the wilderness, and Trump and his administration is a well-oiled machine. They know exactly what they want to do. Now, look, I think a lot of people have an issue at this point, ones that are critics of what Musk is doing under Trump. I think the criticism is really about style, right? I mean, in other words, what would normally happen in a situation like this? We would get a 6-month task force to report back to the president, and then within 2 years, we'll decide we'll have 4 to 5%. We'll cut spending and all of that. Look, Trump doesn't have time for any of that. Musk is going in and looking at it right now. Now, to be clear. And we should, truth matters here, facts matter. Elon Musk is not going in and hitting the delete button on these agencies. These are recommendations that he's trying to find the money for the president to potentially cut or Congress to cut. And I think that's an important distinction here. And look, I think overall, this is not just about money. This is about cutting the size of the federal bureaucracy, taking care of the deep state, and I think that's ultimately what Trump is trying to do here.
Yeah, a lot of it going back to what he calls common sense. Today he issued an executive order talking about plastic straws, getting away from the paper straws. Another department Trump vowed on the campaign trail to massively shake up is the Justice Department. This week, Attorney General Pam Bondi was sworn in, and she's getting right to business. Kelly, lots of emphasis on rooting out what they call the weaponization of government. Talk to us about what priorities she has right out of the gate here.
Well, right now, she's got to make sure that she's able to bring the whole of government within the Department of Justice to a place where it's no longer weaponizing and conducting lawfare. She will do that. She has also been given the task by the president through executive order, as well as swearing her in, to go after anti-Christian bias. And in doing that, she will protect people who practice their faith. So she has a tall task ahead of her. She's prepared for that. And this is a new attorney general who will not put up with people who are conducting lawfare and weaponizing their roles. She'll go after FBI agents. She'll go after lawyers within the Department of Justice to make sure that everybody is operating with the rule of law. Another thing, real quickly, a side note to all of this, look beyond the headlines here and look at the common sense approach that this administration is trying to adopt. We have been operating for many, many years in a government that functions in dysfunction. So what we're experiencing right now is a president and his administration trying to right the wrongs.
You mentioned anti-Christian bias. That brings us to our next topic. Faith, a big focus this week in Washington. We had Vice President Vance speaking at the International Religious Freedom Summit. Then President Trump, of course, spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast. And he did make some news there saying he'd open a presidential commission on religious freedom and a White House faith office, and even start an anti-Christian bias task force. David, let's start with you here. Tell us what you know about these initiatives.
Well, there's a lot of them, right? You listed a whole bunch of them, and all is going to go through the White House Faith Office. Kelly could probably speak a little bit more to that, but it's really a way for evangelicals to have a say once again within the Trump administration, really be a conduit for much of this. Look, that anti-Christian bias is a crucial aspect to all of this. Remember, the Biden administration was very, they came against Christians, according to the Trump administration, whether it be pro-lifers that we've heard about being arrested. But let's also remember those Catholic, whether they be charities or pro-life centers or other places that had arson committed against those structures, and there were 0 arrests by the Department of Justice. So you go through the list of all different things that were going on, and I think that is something that Paula White and others are going to be working in tandem with Pam Bondi with their DOJ and, of course, other government agencies.
And we should mention Kelly has an upcoming interview with Paula White, who is now in charge of the White House Faith Program. We're working on it.
So we have reached out to her. We're working on it.
Okay. I don't want to get ahead of my skis. All right. Thank you guys so much. Kelly, George, and David, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
And when we come back, a look at the executive order the White House titled No Men in Women's Sports. We'll talk with Brent Leatherwood of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission about that and the influence God has given him in the halls of power.
Come on. Secret Service is worried about them? If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? You ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. 20. I want to make this a really good signature, because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
Dan, with the stroke of a pen, President Trump signed the No Men in Women's Sports executive order into law, rolling back a Biden-era guidance that said schools were required to allow trans students to play on sports teams that aligned with their gender identity. Trump's order instead bars students who are born male to participate in girls' sports and from using women's restrooms. And already we've seen new action from the NCAA changing its policy to conform with this order. Joining us now is Brent Leatherwood, president of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Brent, great to see you. Welcome. So first, let me get your reaction to the president signing this executive order, I believe his 7th so far, having to do with transgender issues.
That's right. Well, we support and affirm these moves by the president, and we think actually the NCAA's reaction already tells you that this is having a culture shaping effect, and one that we're glad to see. Finally, after years of this insanity with gender fluidity and all of that permeating throughout government, it's glad to see some sanity restored.
You recently celebrated, Brent, after a federal court ruled the Biden administration's rewrite of Title IX was unconstitutional. Tell us more about that and what it means going forward.
Well, ultimately, this was an attack on the integrity of women's sports and opportunities for women in educational settings. We need to make sure that women have the same opportunities as men. And this gender confusion that had taken over the Biden administration, it was threatening to really wreck that. So again, President Trump's orders, they've restored sanity. Now, I will say this, one caution I have is these are executive actions. That means that they have a shelf life. What we need to start concentrating on now is durable change, and that's only going to come through Congress. So we are using our voice to advocate to members of Congress that they need to follow this up with legislative action. That's really important.
Yeah, I believe there's a bill in the Senate that they're waiting to bring up, and it's an issue that has massive support among Republicans, but just Americans at large. I think something in the 70% range. We know Christians want to, of course, show a message of love while also standing for truth when it comes to things like gender ideology. Brent, help us understand how we can be effective witnesses in a time like this.
Well, it's always good to turn to Scripture, but particularly something like this. Look, we learn in Genesis that God created us in His image, and He created us male and female. And our laws need to reflect that because that's not just a scriptural truth that we know, it's a biological reality. So laws should reflect that. And I think if we walk people through that truth, it will help them understand that God's design for us was actually built for our good and our flourishing and ultimately His glory.
Yeah. So we saw some pictures you shared on X of you with Speaker Johnson this week. Tell us about what it's like being a position and the position that you hold, praying for such powerful leaders in the halls of power.
Well, look, we have a unique relationship with Speaker Johnson. Not only is he a fellow believer, he's a fellow Southern Baptist, and he's actually got a historic tie with this organization. He used to be a trustee of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. So we were able to catch up on some of the unique ties that we have from Southern Baptist life. But then also just to understand, he's in a whirlwind there. He's got a slim majority, and he has to navigate all the complexity right now that we're seeing in the legislative arena. And I wanted him to know that Southern Baptists, Christians, we're praying for him because he's doing what I would say is an admirable job living out his faith convictions and really trying to show leadership.
Yeah, it's important work that you do. Brent Leatherwood of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Brent, great to see you. Thank you.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
And still ahead, everyone is getting ready for the big game this weekend. And workers at a small-town American factory have a hand in the center of it all. See what goes into the making of the official Super Bowl footballs. Finally tonight, a little inside information ahead of the big game this weekend. A factory in the rural village of Ada, Ohio, has been busy preparing the pigskins for the Super Bowl. As soon as the matchup was decided that it would be between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Wilson Sporting Goods football factory jumped into action, preparing the official footballs for the game. The two teams each get a shipment of 108 balls, plus a dozen more for the kickers, all stamped with the Super Bowl logo and the team names. Some balls are used for practice, while others are the ones that are deemed the best. About 50 of them will be locked away for the quarterbacks at kickoff time. The footballs take about 3 days to make, start to finish. It's a 20-step process, most of it by hand. And that is going to do it for this Faith Nation Friday. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have a great weekend and enjoy the Super Bowl if you're watching. We'll see you back here Monday. Take care.